Hi, I'm Ali Hussain, creator of Entmorph, and in this video we're going to take a first look at the Entmorph Code Editor, which is where you develop code, create components, and build applications. I've logged into my account on entmorph.com, so we'll start by creating a new project. From my home screen, I'll click on Create New Project, and I'll give it the name Introducing the Code Editor, and press Enter to create it. This creates an empty project, with the name of the project at the very top, a Save button underneath it, and a Project Details panel which allows us to rename the project. If I scroll down, there's a code editor. In the code editor, we create what are called cells. Each cell contains code, which we can then evaluate to produce an output. We create cells using the namespace commands, which gives us options to create three types of cell: data and actions, which are covered in this and the next video, and components, which are covered in a separate series of videos. If I click on Add Data, it opens a sub-panel with a set of data types we can add. I'll select Number, which creates a number cell, which has a number of sections. At the very top, there's an auto-generated ID, which you can use to refer to the cell from within other cells. It's a good idea to rename a cell's ID as soon as you create it, so I'll do that now. I'll click on the ID and rename it to my number and press Enter. Underneath that, there are Undo, Redo, and Delete buttons, followed by a Cell Commands panel, which we'll look at later. Then there's a code panel, which is the most important part of the cell. Since we selected number, there's a number editor in the code panel. I can set its value in the text box and update it by selecting any of the commands in the number commands panel above it. I'll just scroll down. So below the code panel, there's a run panel, which contains a run button and a live edit checkbox. If I click on run, the output panel becomes populated with the number. Now let's scroll back up to the number editor. Once we're done editing, it's a good idea to close an editor to keep the user interface tidy. If I click on the close button next to the number editor heading, both the number commands and the text box disappear, and we just see the number itself. We can open the number editor again by clicking on it. Now we can close the whole cell. So if I scroll back up and click on the close button next to the cell ID, this closes the whole cell for editing, including the number editor, and it hides the cell commands. Now let's add another cell. I'll scroll back up to the namespace commands and select string, which adds a string cell. Again, I'll rename its ID by clicking on it and renaming it to myString and pressing Enter. All cells have the same structure. There's an ID, a code panel, a run panel, and an output panel. Where they differ is in the code panel editor. In this cell, we have a string editor. If we click on the editor name, which looks like a link, it opens a drop-down menu which lets us change the type and value of the editor. I'll just cancel it for now. For the string cell, I'll just type hello, comma world, and press Enter. And when we click on run, the output panel is populated with the string hello world. Rather than scroll up and down all the time, where possible, I'll use the Goto menu, which is available at the top of most sections. So I'll click on Goto and top to take us back up to the top of the editor. Once you create at least one cell, a Goto cell panel appears at the top of the code editor, which contains the name of each cell as a link to that cell. For example, I can click on myString to go to the myString cell. And I can click on Go to Top to go back to the top of the editor. Now let's add a vector, which is the first collection type we'll look at. I'll scroll down to the namespace commands and click on vector, which adds a vector cell. Again, I'll rename the ID by clicking on it and renaming it to my vector and pressing enter. If we scroll down to the vector editor, a vector can hold a sequence of items. There's already a nil item included by default. So let's add some more items. I'll click on add, and it adds an item with an open select menu, letting me choose the type of item to add. I'll just select true to select a Boolean value and scroll back up, and again I'll click on add and select keyword and type iguana and press enter. So a keyword is like a string, but it starts with a colon and can't have any spaces. It's very useful when used as a key in a map, which we'll look at in a minute. Let's add a couple more entries. I'll scroll back up, click on add, and we can also add the cells that we've already created. So if I scroll down, they're visible under the ID section of the menu. So I'll click on my number and scroll back up. And if I click on add again, and rather than scrolling down, it's also possible to type in the search box at the top of the select menu. So I'll just type my and select my string and scroll back up. So we now have a vector of 5 items. If I scroll down to the output panel and press run, so the output panel is populated with all the items, including the actual values of my number and my string. Now let's just turn on the live edit feature to see how it works. So with live edit on, if I select the first cell and scroll up and click on the delete command, we can see that the output panel is updated in real time. If I select the first and last cells and swap the items around, again, we're seeing the live update as we make the changes. For data structures and for actions, which we'll look at soon, live edit can help us understand how what we're coding will actually work. Let's perform some basic operations on the vector. I'll scroll back up and let's close the vector editor. Click on Goto, namespace commands. So this time I'm going to click on add action. An action is any code which does something with data. There are a number of actions available to us here, and we'll cover most of these in our next video. In this video, we'll just focus on call actions. I'll click on call, which creates a new action cell, with the select function drop-down menu already open. We want to retrieve a value at a given index from the vector. So I'll search for a function called get and select it from the very top. Before continuing, I'll just scroll to the cell ID and rename it to get from vector action and press enter. Now let's scroll back down to the code panel. Within the code panel for this cell, there's now an action editor with a green box which has the name of a function, get, in the tab at its top left. This is a call action, which means that when we run the cell, it will call the get function with a set of arguments that we need to specify. Let's add those arguments now. Within the action args commands, I'll click on add to add the first argument. And scroll down. Within the select dropdown, let's find our vector cell ID. Again, I'll just type my to narrow down the list and select my vector. Then to add the second argument, I'll just scroll back up again, click on add and select number and change it from 0 to 1. Close the editor. Now if we go to the run panel, click on run, and the output shows us the value iguana, which is the first item in our vector if we scroll back up. Let's go back down, and if we turn live edit on and open the number again, and as we change the value of the index, the value in the output updates to show the item at that index, until we go beyond the number of items in the vector, in which case the get function returns nil. Now let's add a map. I'll scroll back up and close this cell, and click on Goto, namespace commands. Now I'll click on Add Data and select Map to create a new map cell. Again, I'll rename it to My Map. Map is short for hash map, also known as a dictionary or an associative array in some languages. It's a data structure which lets you store a unique key with an associated value. You can then use that key to look up the value in the map. You can use any type of value as the key for a map, and it's very common to use strings and numbers. But even more common is to use keywords as keys, which is why there's a default empty keyword which is created when you first create a new map. Let's add some keys to it. So let's start with the first key. We'll just call it number and press enter. And then the second one, call it string. And for the third one, click on keyword and select vector. Press enter. And now let's add values to each of these keys. For number, I'll select my number. For string, I'll select my string. And for vector, I'll select my vector. Now let's click on Run. And in the output panel, we see a map with all the values we would expect. Maps are probably the most useful data structure in Entmorph, as they are in most languages which use them. There are a lot of things we can do with them, and here we'll look at a small handful of operations. We'll start with retrieving values by key. As we did with vectors, we'll use the get function. Rather than go to the top of the editor every single time, if I scroll back up to the cell commands, and if I click on Insert Action After, I can add a cell immediately after the current one. So I'll click on Call, which adds a call cell. If I scroll down to the Select Function dropdown, I'll type get again, and select get. Before I continue, I'll just rename the cell. So I'll scroll back up to the cell ID and rename it to get from action, get from map action, and press enter. And now let's add some arguments to it again. So I'll click on add and select the name of the map. So my map. And for the key, I'll click on add and select keyword and type in number. If I just scroll down, let's use the live edit feature. So it returns 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If I change it from number to string, it changes it to the hello world string. And finally, if I change it to vector, press enter, it changes it to the value of the vector, or of my vector. Next, we'll look at how to add a value to a map. I'll scroll back up to the cell commands. And again, I'll use the insert action after and select call. And this time, from the select function dropdown, I'll select the assoc function. This creates a call to the assoc function, which is a function which takes a minimum of 3 arguments, which I'll add now. The first is the collection we want to update. So I'll click on add and select my map. The second is a key within the collection whose value we want to update. So I'll click on add, select keyword, and type number. Press enter. And the final argument is the value that we want to give the key within the map. So I'll click on add, select number, and change its value to 54321. Press enter. Now, if I click on run, in the output we see our number key has the value 54321. So this is updating an existing key. If we were to rename number to another number and click on run, the original number reverts to its value 12345. But you can see at the end it's been joined by another entry with the name another number and the value 54321. So the assoc function is used either to update an existing key or to add a new key. And this is a good time to mention that Entmorph uses immutable data structures. And this applies to maps, vectors, and as we'll soon see, sets. What this means is you can't update any of these structures, at least not in the traditional sense. Instead, when we call a function like assoc, what it actually does is it creates a new map which contains the change we want. But the original map doesn't change. And what this means is that both the original and the new map exist at the same time. This has many implications, and we'll go over these in future videos as well as in the documentation. Next, let's add a set. Scroll back up, close the action editor, and I'll click on Insert After. I'll just do one more thing actually, I'll just rename this cell to assoc map action and press enter. Now if I click on Insert After in the cell commands and select Set, this creates a set cell after the current cell. Again, I'll rename it to my set, press enter, and scroll down to the code panel. So a set is a data structure which only lets you add unique items to it. If I scroll down and click on Live Edit, and we can see the output immediately contains the value nil. So let's add some more items to our set. I'll click on Add, select Number, and change its value to 1, and close it. And in the output panel, the number 1 is added to the set. If I scroll back up, click on Add, Number, and if I set it to 1 again, you'll notice that there's only a single 1 item in the output. It's only when I set it to 2 that a second item appears, the number 2. I'll close the editor. So we can add as many items with the same value, but only one of them will appear in the output. Click on Number, 1, and so on. So there are only 3 distinct values in our set, and the rest are duplicates, so those don't appear in the output. There are various set operations like union, difference, and intersection, which we'll look at in a dedicated video on sets. Now let's go back to the top of the editor. Click on Goto and Top. One very useful feature of the code editor which I want to show you is this. Suppose we want to rename my number to another number. In a traditional text-based code editor, we would have to use the text editor's search and replace operation. And manually go through all occurrences of the search string to confirm the replacement. Even in a single file, it can be quite tedious. But if the item we're renaming exists across multiple files, then the process can be very time-consuming and prone to errors. In Entmorph, all we have to do is to rename it. If I click on My Number and open the cell ID for editing. So I'll rename it from My Number to another number and press enter. Now if we click the back arrow on the browser to take us back up to the Goto cell panel, we can see that my number has been renamed to another number. But we also refer to my number from a number of other places, for example my vector. So if we click on my vector, it's also been renamed there. Let's click back, and one more place is my map. So if we click on my map and scroll down, again, my number has been renamed to another number. This is a general feature of Entmorph editors, and doesn't just apply to cell IDs. Anywhere you create an ID, if you rename it, all references to that ID will automatically be updated. Now let's go back up to the top Click on Goto and Top. And let's scroll down and look at the Undo panel. There's an Undo button and a Redo button which is disabled. If I expand the Undo History panel, we can see that the last 50 or so changes have been recorded, together with an index and a description for each change. The very last row is highlighted in grey. This indicates the change that will be undone when we click on the Undo button. We can see that the last change is renamed MyNumber to another number. If we click on Undo, it should undo that change. Let's do that now. The first thing to notice is that the browser scrolls to the place where the change was made. And we can see that another number has been rolled back to MyNumber. And if we scroll back up to the Undo panel, the Redo button has now become enabled. If we look at the Undo history, the highlighted row has moved up to the previous row. So if we were to press Undo again, it will reverse that change. But pressing Redo instead will cause the rename change to be redone. So let's click on Redo. And again, the browser scrolls to the place where the change was made. And we see that MyNumber has once more been renamed to another number. In the next video, we'll look at various other actions available in the namespace commands Add Actions panel. To start using Entmorph now, you can create a free account by going to entmorph.com, clicking on Sign Up and submitting your details. You can access more videos on the Entmorph YouTube channel, youtube.com/@entmorph. Please share this video with anyone you think will benefit from using Entmorph. Thanks for watching.